Hey guys, what's up? So today we're going to be making some lasagna soup, vegetarian style. The only thing that I'm not sure if it's vegetarian is the soy sauce, but I just don't eat meat. I'm okay with animal products. I just don't eat meat. So for example, that's why I said vegetarian. I am using plant-based cream, so if you guys are vegan and you need to readjust any of these ingredients, feel free to do so. We're also using plant-based butter, so we're going to start off with the butter and we're going to use that to saute the veggies. We are going to use a little bit of soy sauce, which I've already measured out here. We're going to use a little bit of cheese. You can use Parmesan, you can use mozzarella, you can use whatever you want. This is what I have on hand. This is what I'm going to use. A can of diced tomatoes, some cream, like heavy cream, some cream cheese, a can of tomato sauce, some garlic. You can either use fresh or minced, tomato, zucchini, bell pepper, and onion, and some spinach. And then these are the seasonings that I'm going to be using. The only thing that you probably can't get at the store is this. I found this at my local farmer's market, and I already have some salt in here. So I'm going to add all of the seasonings to this bowl to make it easier to add here. So here I have all the seasonings in this little bowl. The only thing that you might want to be a little heavy-handed on is the oregano. Some of these seasonings probably overlap, so you don't want to like overdo it. But be a little heavy-handed on the oregano because since it is like an Italian-inspired meal, that's the only thing that I was a little more on. So this soup is going to pack a lot of flavor. We don't need a ton of seasonings. We just need a variety. So we have this here. Okay guys, these are the veggies cut up, not very aesthetic, but they are chopped up nonetheless. I did leave like the outer peeling of the onion. I'm going to show you guys what we're going to do with this in a minute. The only thing that I chopped up pretty fine is some of the onions, like half of the onion, more or less. The rest of this is going to go in the blender. If you don't have a blender, use a food processor. If you don't have a blender or food processor, you can just saute all the veggies, just cut them up a little bit smaller if you like veggies in your soup. For me, personally, I do, but for this idea, I saw a video on YouTube and she blended the veggies so that it would be like a mince, sort of like in replace of the ground beef. I don't do personally meat replacements such as like I need ground beef, I'm going to go buy some vegan ground beef. I don't do that personally. I don't consume those products. So I just use veggies and veggie product, etc. in replace of my meat. So that was a great idea for me. The only thing that I'm going to put in the pan to saute before I blend these up, or while I'm blending these up, before I added the blend vegetables, I'm going to add some of the diced onions. And so I'm going to add butter and diced onions to my pot. So I'm going to show you guys that. And also, I forgot to show you guys, of course, this is lasagna soup, so we need lasagna. This is a very versatile recipe, so if you don't have lasagna, you can use any pasta. It's same. I mean, it's gonna taste pretty much the same thing for any of these. If you don't have this cheese, use a different cheese. If you don't have soy sauce, leave it out. You can use any butter, you can use any cream or milk or half and half, any tomato products, things like that. So the only veggie I'm not gonna put in the processor or the blender is my spinach, because I'm gonna add that last. I'm going to add a little bit of minced garlic. I'm not a huge fan of garlic, so I'm just going to add a little bit. So half of the veggies are already in the blender. I'm just going to add a little bit of water and blend them up so that it'll be easier to blend them up. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to add all the veggies. I'm going to see how much this puree this makes, or how much mince this makes. And then if we need the rest, I'll use the rest. If not, I'll freeze the rest for another soup. And these are the veggies that we have left. So this is what it's looking like so far, and it was a little bit more liquidy. So if you don't want it liquidy, then probably use a food processor and just don't add water. But it's gonna all incorporate into the soup anyways. I also added a little bit of my canned diced tomatoes. As you can see, my onions and garlic are all sauteed up, and I'm going to add what I blended in with them. So what I did was I added one more Roma tomato and added the rest of the Roma tomato that we had on the chopped up veggie plate. And I'm actually going to save the rest of the zucchini, onion, and bell pepper. I'm just going to freeze it for another soup. So I'm going to blend this up and add this to the pot as well. Okay, so I already added the rest of the can of diced tomatoes, and I added, I filled that can up with water and I added some of that. Now I'm going to add this can of tomato sauce. You guys can do an Italian blend if you guys have one. I don't have one. I'm just going to use what I have. And I'm also going to fill this can back up with water, at least halfway, and get some of this sauce out and pour it back in the soup. This is what it's looking like so far. So these are the veggies that we're going to throw in a freezer bag and throw them in the freezer for either like smoothie or another soup or another recipe. So we saved some of the veggies, but I'm going to throw a little bit of my favorite pasta sauce in just because we had so many green veggies, and the soup is red, but it has a very earthy smell. So yeah, I'm going to add some of this just to give it a more tomato-y taste, lasagna-ish taste. So guys, I actually ended up adding the whole jar of ragu. I know this is my first time making this, so it's going to be a little bit of changes that we have to implement. So I'm going to add my seasoning blend, but looking at the soup now, we might need a little bit more seasoning later on because it's a full pot of soup. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this, let it simmer for about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll come back and taste it and see how it's tasting. So I did go ahead and add a little bit more of every one of the seasonings, including salt on top of the soup, and I'm just going to stir this in. I'm going to also add in the soy sauce if I don't spill it all over first. And as you can see, I just added in like a tablespoon. This is just a medicine cup. I don't have measuring spoons, guys, but I just added in one of these, and I'm going to stir it all up, put a lid on it, and let it simmer on about medium low, or medium low, for on about 3. I guess it would be medium high. I don't know. Anyways, I'm going to simmer it for about 15 or 20 minutes. Okay guys, so here I have the oven ready lasagna sheets. You could use regular lasagna, I think, but I'm just using these because that's what I have on hand. I originally bought it for lasagna and decided to do soup. So anyways, I hope these work just the same. But like I said, you guys can use any kind of pasta really. So I'm just going to cut these up. And you don't have to be anything special. It can just be like a rough chop. And yes, I'm using a plate. As you can tell, this is my cutting board plate. So I'm just going to break it instead because the knife is not knifing, guys. These sheets are so hard. But anyways, I've never actually tried to cut lasagna before. But we're just going to break them with our hands. And like I said, it's just a rough break. So this is what they look like all chopped up. Look at how it looks, guys. We haven't even added the cream yet. I think it looks amazing. So I'm going to add a couple of bay leaves. I just now thought of that. I'm going to add a couple of bay leaves and we'll see what it does after a few more minutes. Okay, so I'm also going to attempt like a homemade rustic bread. I saw this on Julia Pacheco's channel. If you guys watch her, she is very great at budget meals. So she says 2 cups of all-purpose flour. This is the King Arthur brand and it's unbleached. She says 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and she said a half a teaspoon of salt and a half a teaspoon of sugar, and I'm going to do a teaspoon of each. I don't know. I'm just like that. I don't know why I'm like that, guys. I'm just like that. But anyways, I'm just going to overdo it a little bit on the salt and sugar just to ensure that it has some flavor, and we're going to see how this works out. So here I have our 2 cups of flour. I'm going to pour our sugar and salt. And she says that 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I'm going to do just 1 tablespoon. So I think that's about equivalent. She says whisk the dry ingredients together. I don't have a whisk either. I'm just going to use a fork. I like to think of myself as a minimalist, so I don't have all of these like fancy kitchen tools. I just use what I have. So she says to add in about 3/4 cup of warm water and whisk until it forms a dough. She said it'll take a couple of minutes, so we're going to try and see what it does. Okay, so she wants it to form a dough sort of like this, but mine is super sticky, so I'm going to add a little bit more flour on top to try to cut the stickiness. So this is what it looks like after I added a little bit of flour so it wouldn't like just stick to our hands. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring it over here to our floured surface. We're going to lay it down and we're going to try to knead for 3 to 5 minutes, she said. So I've never done this before, so we're going to see how it turns out. But she said to stick it in the oven after you get done. You kind of form a little loaf if you don't have a loaf pan. Stick it on any pan that you have. Score it on top a little bit with a knife and stick it in the oven on 425 for 15 minutes and then on 350 for 10 minutes and then it should be done. If you want to double the recipe, double it. If you want to make a smaller loaf, like one breadstick, I guess, because it's a pretty small loaf, you can do half of the recipe. So we're going to try to do that. So this is our loaf. It doesn't look the best right now, but this will be my first homemade loaf of bread if it turns out. So I think it looks pretty decent. I tried to shape it like in a rectangular shape like bread comes in, and I tried to score it a little at the top. I'm not sure guys. You tell me. If you're a professional bread maker, you're probably not watching this, but if you are and you're watching this, let me know. Okay, so I'm gonna stick this in the oven, like I said, on 425 for 15 minutes, and then on 350 for another 10 minutes. I'm probably gonna pour just a little bit of oil on top. It's actually been about 30 minutes, so we're gonna open this and see what it looks like. As you can see, it's looking great. I'm gonna wait until the very end to put the cream, and I think I'm gonna add the noodles about now. Now, all the other recipes that I saw added the noodles almost immediately when putting to simmer. I wanted the soup to simmer a little more, and I have oven ready already noodles, so it's not going to take long for them to cook at all. So, as you can see, everything has came together quite nicely. It smells delish. You can't even tell that it actually had a green base at first from all the veggies, and honestly, it just smells like tomato sauce, but a very flavored tomato sauce. But we're gonna add our pasta, and then we'll probably just add our spinach after the pasta is pretty much done and when we're about ready to plate. I actually reserved some as tomato soup so that I can use this with my grilled cheese one day this week for lunch. So I reserved quite a bit. I needed room in the pot anyway, so I'm about to add the noodles and then I'll end up adding the cream. So our pot was almost full, so yeah, we needed that space anyways. And it tastes amazing. Even my kids approve. So we just want to stir it up after our noodles are in there. So I'm going to add a little bit more liquid just because mine is so thick. With that, you can add a little bit more flavor if yours doesn't have enough flavor. You guys can add chicken broth or vegetable broth. For me, I'm just going to add some water because mine is so thick and so flavorful. Honestly, it won't do it any harm if I add about a cup of water in here, a cup and a half of water. So I'm gonna taste that as well a few minutes after I add it in and let it simmer again. And if it needs more seasoning or something like that, I'll add that in too. So this is what it's looking like, and it looks great and it smells great and it tastes great. And finally, we're gonna add the last ingredients. It's gonna be well, I was gonna add the spinach, but I'm gonna add the cream first and the cream cheese, and then I'm gonna add the spinach. I just cut open the top of the cream cheese, and we're just gonna do like a half of a block, so I'm just gonna squeeze that in there and let it melt down. Guys, this is what our homemade bread looks like. Not amazing, but it's my first time, so this is what it looks like. This this is how it looks, and it looks amazing. So this is how my husband's plate is looking. He gets taquitos with his, and this is cheese filling, just to have a little bit more, just to be a little bit more filling. So this is what his is looking like. Remember, we have no meat in here, so this is a fully vegetarian meal. And this is what my plate is looking like with fresh bread. I decided to top mine with I think it was a Mexican blend cheese and a little bit of the cheese that I showed you guys. But this is what the bread looked like, and it tastes super amazing, guys.